Terry Gormley, welcome to Focus on the Fun Stuff podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
The pleasure's all mine. I'm really pleased that we've been able to make this happen today because, I mean, you're also known as the Mindshaper, aren't you? So this is a little flavour of what's to come. Not that you're going to be hypnotising me on the podcast, shaping my mind.
Although, who knows?
Yeah.
You did say it was an open forum, right?
Yeah. But I know this is going to be a real cracker of an episode today because we're going to talk about all things mindset, performance. You're a human behaviour specialist, aren't you? And I know that your absolute appetite is you really apply that into business owners.
Yeah.
And ultimately unpick why business owners don't move forwards or do. Mm-hmm. I would think ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. I think that we all have a unconscious rhythm. We do things without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And very often the big success, what I found for business owners, is the 80-20, 80% psychology and 20% mechanics, or what they do. And I think very early on, well, not very early on, but at least 15 years ago, I started delving into that with business owners and entrepreneurs. So it's a fascination for me, and I love it. One of the things I love most is when you have an effect on somebody and it transforms their life. Mm-hmm. And I love that. You see me get emotional when we were away golfing, but I do get emotional with it. I think it's like amazing. If somebody transforms their life and they, as a result of coming into contact with you, I don't think there's anything better than that. You can make as much money as you want, but I don't think there's anything better than that.
Totally with you on that, like the impact you're having on somebody else's life. Mm-hmm. So just to introduce you, because I think my guest will do a much better job than I would, just introduce you to the audience, because actually your beginnings are very different to your passions now, and you were a coal miner originally.
That's right, yeah.
Which I feel like, I don't know, it just feels like a million years ago, coal miner.
Well, I am 60 next summer, so there's a lot of water under the bridge, as they say. But yeah, I grew up in South Yorkshire, a little village called Maltby in South Yorkshire. And my dad was a coal miner for 45 years. My mum was a farm worker. And I grew up being out on the streets on my own, being at school and stuff like that. And I hated school, really. I say I hated school, apart from PE. I used to go in for PE and play football.
Right.
But then I left school with no qualifications. I had zero interest in it because everybody that was in a mining village went to the pit or worked for, did something for people around the mining villages. And everybody that we lived on an estate worked at the pit. Yeah. So I knew I was going to go into the coal mines. And sure enough, I left school, no qualifications. And a few months later, my dad said, "You're not laying in bed," as he did. He said, "You're not laying in bed. You're going to get yourself a job at the pit." So he got me an interview and I got a job. And I spent my first 6 years of my working life coal mining, yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And when we were just having the little mini chat prior to getting started on the podcast, you did say there was a moment where you went, "Is this it?" Like, what triggered that, do you think?
I think, and this will be true for a lot of people in business as well, because, we're all human. But I think if you're not getting what you want from your life, there comes a moment for every person where you say, "I've had enough. I'm no longer doing this." And sometimes people can be, especially in business, can be at breaking point before they make key decisions. And I was laid in bed, like wide awake in the night thinking, I've got to go down to the pit tomorrow and work again. And weekends would go so quickly. And I was like, okay, I've had enough of this. And I was a coal miner on strike for a year as well. So was a really tough time. And after the strike finished, an opportunity came to take redundancy. And I took it with both hands. I thought, I don't care what I do, but what I do will involve being in fresh air. Then I went into firefighting. So, but again, having no qualifications is a bit of a hindrance. But these days, I think it's a superpower. I think it's a superpower because you have to try much harder to do. And I think the entrepreneurs that do very well are very often dyslexic, and they have to try really hard because, actually working harder than everybody else to get the same results really help you. And I was almost a year unemployed, and I managed to get in the Air Force as a firefighter. And and it's from then on that I started my journey so I'll be 22 years old then. And then I started my journey of learning to learn, and my love and passion for learning all things that will help me. I don't read any books that are not don't fascinate me. The subject, where it's around human behaviour, people's success, how they did this, how they transformed their life. So pretty much since that time, I've learnt books for work because I spent the next sort of 15 years as a firefighter in different areas. 3 years in the Air Force, and I worked with fast jets in the Defence Fire Services, and then I worked local authority in Norfolk Fire Service doing about 100 road traffic accidents a year. And so all that gives you a bit of a, wow,
perspective.
Yeah. And then like not all firefighters, but most firefighters have a job on the days off.
Yes. Yeah.
All my friends were making money. There were roofers, there were bricklayers, and I had like zero skill. So eventually we moved. I got promoted, then got promoted again. And I moved back to my village, and I travelled 70 miles to work every day because we needed to look after my dad, who shortly passed away. And for the next 9 years, myself and my brothers, we were looking after my mum as well. So I travelled to work, and the first got me into thinking about business is, goodness, I need to make a bit more money. Yeah. How do I make more money on my days off? And that's kind of how it all started. And that was in 1998, 1999.
Right. And what side business, what did you create?
So I love learning. So I thought, what would I like to do? I know it'd be really beneficial to build computers and sell computers.
Oh, right. Wow.
So I know I went to because all I'm trying to do is make enough money to pay for my fuel. The first, it was like it was £25 a week I was spending. And I thought what I'll do is I'll if I can make £25 extra a week, like build and sell one computer, then that'll be it. So I went to Rotherham College, and they said to me, do 6 courses over a couple of years. And I said, no, I want to do them all. So I went, every night I was off, I went to college and learned how to build. And,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then I kept getting people calling me at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. My PC's not working. I thought, I'm going to find something else.
I feel like you picked a pretty technical option to start. You didn't make things easy for yourself there.
No, and then I sat there, and I think a lot of people watching this will have because I think what we do is we go into things that we know. We become the operator of something when we first start.
Yeah.
And we have to, and I think you've done the same,
Yes, totally.
I'm skilled at this, so I'd spent 15 years in the fire service, and I'd done everything I wanted to do. And I knew a lot about fire safety. I knew a lot about fire safety in business and how to manage them. So I started a little consultancy business, and then that led on to selling fire products, and which led me to bring a company and work with a company in the UK who like do fire training products and fire training buildings. And then in the next 18 months, I had a telephone and an email address, and I made £4.8 million worth of sales with a telephone, email. So we built Strathclyde Fire Training Centre. We built one in Ireland, and it was like a good journey. And then they were acquired. It was my first experience of they were acquired, and in order for them to be acquired, they wanted my shares in the UK. So I sold my shares and then carried on to other things.
Oh my gosh.
It's fascinating, huh?
Yeah, totally. And is it much later on where, again, just in our little chat before the podcast, you said, was it about 15 years ago that you actually then did a course that literally changed your life?
That was in 2003. So what was happening, I grew up in a mining village, and I found it very difficult to communicate with people in business. In the military, they call it TLA, three-letter abbreviations.
Right.
And so if you've been in the military, you know what they are, but also business has its own language too. So I went on an 8-day course that I thought was to learn how to communicate. And, well, it was, but I got much more than what I bargained for. So for the first 4 days, I always say this, for the first 4 days, I sat there with my arms folded saying, go on, entertain me. And the last 4 days, I spent in tears because I, for the first time in my life, realised I am not my behaviour.
Okay.
So how I act in certain circumstances are a product of the environment I grew up with and the people around.
Interesting.
So I see your eyes going, so I'll explain it a little bit more. So psychologists say that the first 7 years of your life are what's called an imprint period.
Right.
Where all your values are installed. Nobody teaches you how to speak or to walk. So what you do is, if you grow up in Austria, you will speak 5 or 6 languages naturally. Nobody teaches you how to do that. And so what you do is you unconsciously absorb everything that's around you, and then you replicate it. And so that's like the product of my upbringing. I used to bottle stuff up, and I used to get angry, and then the little like stacking a cake, all the little behaviours would come, and I'd blow, and I'd get angry and shout. And that in that course, I had realised that there is an inner strategy. There's things that happen step by step that if you move into them and you change them, you can control the outcome or control the result. And here we are 22 years later, and that's still because a successful business owner has a structure that they do, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's kind of what,
Yeah.
So I did that 8-day course, and then immediately after I started selling a lot more because I understood other people's communication style.
Wow.
And I was take these pieces of equipment out to people, and then I started building rapport with people, understanding how they communicate. And I would be, mirroring them or feeding back to what they said. I said, so have I got this right? This is what you said. Anything else? And they'd say, yeah. And then they'd say, right, how do I pay? And this had never happened to me before. And I said, well, the stuff's in the back of the van. Don't you think you should have a look at it first before you pay? Oh, no, I'll just. I was like, okay. And I'd never experienced that. And I made more money in a week after that course than I'd made in several months before.
Wow.
Because I picked all the appointments. I elicited from people what they want. They said the millionaire's formula is 3 steps. I remember going on with Keith Cunningham, Rich Dad.
No way.
Yeah, on Tony Robbins' wealth seminar about 2007 or 8 or something like that. And he said, here's a millionaire's formula. Do you want it? I was like, yeah. He said, get a pen out. To everybody in the audience, we're all scribbling out. And he said, step 1, are you ready? Are you ready? And he built up all the anticipation. I said, yeah. And he said, find out what somebody wants or needs, step 1. And I'm like, okay. And I'm expecting all this thing.
It's going to get better.
Step two, go get it. Okay. Step 3, give it to them. Every successful business has them 3. And I was like, oh, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
And what we've done in the years since, I had a conversation with somebody this morning, and I said, look, let's break it down to the simplest form. What are the steps that we need to do? And the simpler it is, the better you can scale with it. Mm-hmm. So that first course, then I did another 12-day course after that. Then I did a coaching course with one of the co-creators of neuro-linguistic programming called John Grinder. So I spent 5 days with him, and then I booked a trainer's training course. So I spent 21 days, and in 2017, I think he'd be about 76 then, I was helping him train trainers of NLP neuro-linguistic programming in Portugal. Yeah, I was over there for 4 weeks, just helping and assisting. And it fascinates me. This guy's an absolute genius. Had a big impact in my life and so many millions across the world. And so that's first started. And then as a result of doing these trainings, I started working in professional rugby with a mindset of rugby players.
Right.
That led into football, then into snooker. And then in 2010, I started then working with business owners and entrepreneurs. So fascinating journey, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I first, I don't know if we met, but I had heard of you in 2012 because I joined, which I mentioned probably on nearly every episode, the Entrepreneurs Circle. But I joined, and I can't remember what year it was, but ultimately I was first aware of you because I knew that you were delivering a course in that group called The Will to Act. And unfortunately, I've never done that course. So like way back then, I was not taking any action. I was just joining things and not even consuming them, to be fair, just joining things and just totally, my business was a couple of years old and like fully in the middle of everything. But it was like the most talked about thing I've ever known in the Entrepreneur Circle. And ultimately, this course was about what I believe you think is the route to most business owners, that it's that moving something forward. It's that the will to act, like that actually what's the bridge between the two things, like moving them from just having ideas to actually doing.
Yeah. I think that's exactly it. There is a bridge between the results that you want and the actions and things that you do on a daily basis. There is a bridge, and so I say it everywhere I go. I was the first ever member of the Entrepreneur Circle. And I've made a proper thing out of it. Very clear. I made a proper thing out of it, and it's fascinating because I've learned so much as you talk about Nigel Bottrell, and he's done so much for so many. It's incredible, and it all came about because I was in his first year mastermind. Then this often happens when you're in the Entrepreneur Circle. You say, actually, I'm in the wrong business.
Yeah.
It happens to so many people. If you've been involved in it for a long time, it's like, geez, I've learned all this stuff now, and I know I'm not making enough money, and I'm going to go into something else.
Yeah, totally.
And so I was in the mastermind 2010, 2011. I was the first person to speak on the stage, and he saw my fear on that and made me do it in front of people. First member to speak on the stage, not a paid speaker.
Right.
And then in 2012, I kept talking to him about mindset. I said, Nige, so all these people, this is the exact words I said, Nige, why do you think you teach all this great stuff and nobody does any, or hardly anybody does anything with it? And he said, I don't know, Terry. And I said, well, I do. And then I said, let me run a course. And we were actually on a 4-day £1 million master plan course.
Yes,
you probably
remember
did it.
that, yeah.
So he said, I'll tell you what, Terry. He said, I'll get this stuff printed off at lunchtime. I'm going to put you on the stage straight after lunch. And he said, and we'll see if anybody's interested in it, because mindset stuff is difficult to sell.
Yeah.
Because you can't quantify it. If you buy a marketing course or something like, then you can say, oh, that's the direct.
Yeah, the direct impact. And also people don't know what they don't know, do they? If they don't know it's actually going to have a direct impact, they think it's woo-woo or whatever.
Yeah, and very often they don't realise that they've changed when they do these things. And they just realise that, I look back and I did that course last year. A year after I did the first ever Will to Act, there were so many posts saying, and people would say, I didn't think that I got much from it, but I've done this in my business. I always talk about my experience in like running marathons or doing the Ironman 70.3 or free fall parachuting on it, because I use it as a story of fear to get over people's fear.
Yeah.
And so, skipping back to what happened, Nigel said to me, right, I'll put you on the stage. And I remember it, I was on the stage, there's about 120 business owners in the room. And I'm at the stage and Nigel's on the left-hand side stood, and he brought me up. I was pooping myself, if I'm allowed to say that. And I'm on the stage, 120 business owners, and I just simply said this. Nigel put me on stage, making me feel uncomfortable. I said, but, we have to be a little bit uncomfortable in our businesses. So I just want to start this by asking a question. And I put my right hand up and I said, how many people here know that if they did 90 minutes a day, 5 days a week, their business would be transformed? And everybody put their hands up, and Nigel put, he's excitable, but he's like jumping up and down like that. And I said, now keep your hand up if you do it every single day, 5 days a week. And all the hands went down apart from 6, and one of which was Nigel's. And I'll never forget the look on his face as he had his hand up like that, and he was looking around the room, and he was almost like going, what's the point? Doing all this and nobody's actually taking action.
I can imagine how frustrated he was with that.
Yeah, because he gets frustrated. He's like, just do this and you'll be successful.
Yeah.
And I said, so what I want to do is put on a course, a 2-day course. I tried to get Nigel to do it in 4 days because I believe in total immersion in these things, being there. And you've done a Tony Robbins event, so you know what I mean by that. And Nigel said, I can't sell that. And I was like, okay, well, we'll do our best in 2 days. And I ran 3 or 4 of them over the next several months. And then Nigel saw the changes that were happening to people in the inside world, and the results on the outside world were multiplying. And I think that's what gave him the idea for the EC Training Academy, which he's now just got plus now.
Just launched,
Because if you have people in there and you work with them, I always say there's an outside world and an inside world. And people are always looking on the outside world for results, what's happening, but very few business owners do this consciously, go in the inside world and fix the things. Maybe not fix, but improve the things in the way in which we think. And I think that's fascinating, really. And that's how that came about. And I started working with some EC members and coaching them. And that's what gave me the thoughts of going into buying businesses, because I was like a lot of businesses, and I'm not just talking 6-figure businesses, there's 7-figure businesses that were improving by 30 and 40% in the first year I worked with them. And I don't like doing the quarterly meetings. I find it boring. So I always say you get business coaches and then you get mindset coaches, but very often you don't get both together.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah. And so like what I would do is I would work with the companies for a year or 2 years maximum, and then I'd pass them on to a business coach, because like I've made the biggest impact in that period. And that's, for me, it's about, and I learn every single business owner or entrepreneur listening to this now or in the future. If you ask a business owner what they want, they'll say, I want £1 million turnover or whatever it is. So it's a big thing. And then you say, for what purpose? I very infrequently use the word why.
Right.
I always use for what purpose, because it puts your brain into a different place. For what purpose do you want £1 million business? And they'll say, so I can do this. And then what will that give you? Well, I'll be able to do this. And this is a technique in neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, called chunking up. And that will give you get to the highest part might be significance or happiness or whatever it is. If they make a load of money, they can do things for a lot of people around them.
Yeah.
And they make a massive impact. So my goal is always to make a massive impact on the quality of people's lives. And I always, before I start working with anybody, I always figure out what that is and if I can help them get there. And if I can't, I'll just not work with them, irrespective of how much they offer. I just won't do that, because I think it's very, very important that everything that you do should have a win-win around it. You should be a win for the people, and it should be a win for you. And if it's not, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I totally get that. So just on the Will to Act course, and I guess the bridge between getting stuff done. I mean, when we exhibit at like conventions or Nigel's event, or like literally one of our angles with the PA support is ultimately that we know most. I mean, I've been there, I've done it myself. You leave, you pay a ticket, or you buy an online course, or you buy even books. You acquire stuff, or you want to, things you should be doing, but implementation or getting it done is the most difficult thing, isn't it? And I'm sure that, whether it's other things coming up, distraction, not having the ability, and you think you don't have the ability to do it. I would love to just delve into, because I'm sure there's going to be people listening to this to go, well, I went to that event last month. Have I implemented anything? Have I... and Nigel always has the story which is a very different tactic, which I have talked about on the podcast before, which is he sometimes challenges himself by going, well, if at the end of the month this was going to happen, or my family were going to get kidnapped, or that's quite a dramatic strategy but ultimately it proves the same point, that if something really, really cataclysmic was going to happen in your life, people would make things happen. So why do they not generally?
Now we're getting right into the meeting, because I love the study of human excellence.
Yeah.
The difference that makes a difference between one person succeeding and the other not. Even we talked earlier about if there's two twins, one might become really financially successful, another one might go to prison, but they've grown up in the same environment. And the reason that I trademarked Mindshaping, and people thought, that's a bit woo, I hate the title, it sounds all this sort of stuff. But really, everything comes from the inside world, the way in which you think. Now, to test this, Emma 10 years ago doesn't think in the same way, because she's not had the experience as she does now. Is that fair?
Yes, totally.
Yeah. And so what we do is we grow at our own level, or we don't. And I think that there's three things that people listening to this have to do in order to be more successful or make a more impact on the lives of themselves and the people around them. So we talk about, you go on training courses, you get books, and then they go on the shelf and you do nothing else with them. So what we call shelf help, not self-help.
I love that.
Yeah. You not heard that before?
No, never.
Shelf help, and it's like, And then if you know what to do, you've got a good strategy, then you're not actioning it. People say, well, you lack discipline. Well, that's one way of saying it, but people like Jocko Willink, he talks about discipline, but in order to create that discipline, he had to be in an environment like the Marines to learn all them little skills every day. And so you've got a plan and you need to action your plan, but what happens when you don't is really what I think is important. And if we understand this, I have a framework, what I call STEAR, STEAR. And the framework is, you want a result. So I remember going into Doncaster Rovers, and all the footballers were having a terrible run, and I put result on the right-hand side of a whiteboard. There's 31st team players there. And I said, football's all about results, right? And they all went, yeah. I said, fellas, football's all about results, right? And they all went, right. I went, wrong. Now I'm going to explain to you why. And they went, oh, this is interesting. So I said, if you're a professional footballer, and please don't think this is about football for everybody listening to this, because this is the exact same to be true for business owners and entrepreneurs. So results are a direct correlation with how you act and behave. So if you're a footballer or you're a business owner and you drink till 4 a.m, your performance the next day is not going to be great. So your results are going to be impacted. Everybody knows that. And then I'll say to people, so all your actions and behaviours have to be aligned with the result that you want. And this is where people very often say, I don't really know what I want. Okay, well, that's the first step. And I know that you've had Will on here.
Yes.
And
Will
Will's,
Polston,
yeah,
yeah.
and Will Polston in his book about
North Star
the
thinking.
North Star thinking is
Yeah.
all around that. And then I started really putting some study into it. Well, why don't people act or behave in the right way? And then I realised that your emotional state has an impact on the actions that you take. Now, I started wondering why this works. When I worked 20 years ago with people with depression and anxiety, I used to ask this question. I used to say, okay, so you've experienced this thing called depression. They say, yeah. And I said, when you're experiencing this thing called depression, if you have 100 thoughts in a day, how many are positive and how many are negative? And they very often do. What? Mm-hmm. And I said, how many positive thoughts do you have in a day while you're experiencing this thing called depression? And almost all of them, and I've spoken to thousands of people over the years, say, I don't have any positive thoughts.
Right.
And if you understand how positive thoughts influence the chemical pharmacy in your brain, so an example will be Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about cortisol being the stress hormone. If you're raising that, the effect that it has on you. And I think if you're having negative thoughts, what happens is you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, which used to be the definition of depression. And so I learned from Dr. David Hawkins the scale of consciousness, and you can pick it up. It's a photo on the internet, and it's actually the first time that they ever measured emotions. Okay. And the emotions are measured in megahertz per second. So I'll give you an example. Shame and guilt are 20 megahertz per second, so low frequency. Gratitude is 900 megahertz per second. So if you're in fear at 20 or 30 or 40 megahertz per second, so if you're frightened of taking action, you think, if I take action, a bit like a podcast, if I put myself out there, everybody's going to call me and everybody's going to say things. And if you're fear, you're in low frequency. But love and gratitude, these are all high frequencies. So what I call above the line. So I built a framework that I call balanced thinking. And for anybody listening to this now, if you're not feeling great, it's because your emotions are below the line. And you have to have at least 50% of positive thoughts every day. And people laugh at me for years and years now, because if they ask me how I am, and I used to do this on The Will to Act, I said, do it, test me. And I see people I haven't seen for years, and they say, Terry, how are you? I said, I'm embarrassingly awesome. And there's a lot of people that think, what a nutter. But what I've done over the years is I've created a high frequency vibe for myself over the years by having positive thoughts.
As in, like, you've trained yourself.
I have
to
trained
do
myself,
it
yeah.
consistently.
Because even if I'm not feeling awesome,
right,
the lowest you're going to get from me is I'm good.
Okay.
That's my bottom line. I'm good, and then I'm great, and then I'm awesome, then I'm embarrassingly awesome, or I'm unstoppable. And people look at me and think, you crazy. But if you understand how frequency works and you're in a game, you know why you have to be above the line. So for 100 thoughts, you have to have at least 51 to be. I always put it on a horizon. You always put it on a horizon, and then you can track that, and then you train yourself to come out of it. And so you've got results, actions and behaviours, then you've got emotions. And I was like, okay, well, what controls our emotions? Because this is a step-by-step process. Yeah. And it came from the thought process. So if you're in a higher frequency, you have a great thought process and you think positively. And if you've ever experienced, and I think everybody has, when you're in a low mood, you'd make terrible decisions in businesses. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a high performance mood or a high performance state, you make good decisions. You're not fearful about anything. You say, do you know what? That person's gone. They've had it now. That's it. They're out. They're out of here. And then I realized thoughts create chemicals which control your emotions as well. And if they're out of balance. And I was like, okay, TEAR. Right. Okay. And for many years, that was my framework. And then I started going back to my work that I did in the early days. And if you talk, I know that you did a Tony Robbins event. Was it last year or the year before?
I did Business Mastery a couple of years ago, and I've done Unleash the Power Within originally.
So I did Unleash the Power Within when I was already a trainer of NLP.
Right.
And I went to have a look at the strategies that got 10,000 people into a room. But his latest film that's out right now, have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
He's got a free film if you register, I think today might be the end that they're showing it, I think.
Okay.
But he talks about how they've actually measured depressed people on his event. So the study of, don't quote me on the university, one of the universities in America, the best study they ever had for helping people out of depression was magic mushrooms and like training. And so Tony Robbins, they did a test with him, and they all got measured. So he said, I know it works. He said, but my goal is to improve this, 53%.
Yeah.
And he said what they've proven now, because testosterone is a neurotransmitter, a chemical that helps you perform. And at the same time, you'll normally get cortisol, but if you can reduce cortisol and stress, there's no reason for depression to exist, is what he's saying. And I've been a big, subscriber about that.
If you have cortisol, if you don't have it.
So if you're doing something, very often you'll have stress hormone and testosterone at the same time.
Okay.
And by doing what he does, the state management, and I've been teaching this, I taught the first footballer in 2003 that I worked with, state management, and he scored against Manchester City, and he'd not scored for the club for a year. A guy called James Coppinger. I've been fortunate enough to be on like Sky and BBC and ITV and loads of different things with him. And not because I wanted to be there, because I always wanted to take a back seat, but they said, this guy that's changed your life, and there's a Netflix documentary coming out later this year. We're in,
really?
yeah. And I taught him state management, how to get into a high performance state, how to control your breathing, your physiology, your state of being, which controls your performance. And we did this in Doncaster Rovers' old Bellevue ground, and it was my 40th birthday, so it'll be 20 years ago this September. It'll be, my wife had surprised me with a birthday party, a load of people coming, because I was going to go to the football,
right?
Because he was playing this kid, and he was up against David James. Manchester City were Premier League. They were, I want to say League One at the time, or League Two. And they had the best ever run. I worked with all the team, and they had the best ever run in their history by focus on the state of being. If you can train yourself in whatever it is that you do, and this is one of the bridges that we're talking about, if you're in a high performance state and you can do that at your desk, you can fast track to your results. But who teaches it? Hardly anybody.
Hardly anyone. I only know Tony Robbins that talks about it.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that it's a really difficult sell. Yeah, you need to fix your mindset. And what really all that is the bridge, what I call, between my conscious mind and my unconscious or subconscious mind. In NLP, we'll call it congruence, when they're both aligned. But very often, people know what they need to do, and that something inside them stopping them. It prevents them, and they find all kinds of things to do instead of doing the things that they know will take it forward. That's why I designed the Unlocking the Will to Act.
Wow.
To bridge that gap between people know what they need to do and they don't actually do it.
Yeah. So just in terms of the state management, so I'm a massive fan. I mention him a lot again as well on this podcast, of Brendan Burchard. I don't know if So he always talks about that at a real simple level as business owners, a lot of like how we feel today is what's happened 72 hours ago. So did we sleep well? Did we eat well? Did we work out? Just those three simple things can be a really good place to start with. Well, my mood should be better today because I'm treating myself well. So just in terms of state management, can you are there and is it simple to kind of unpick how you do manage your state on this pot? Like if there's people listening now and going, well, yeah, I am a bit all over the place. I get this, I don't know, a letter from HMRC, I've got a client complaining, and it can be very easy to let your state get all over the place, can't it? So yeah.
So there's a couple of things to that. So there was a study done, I think it was 1957, by a psychologist called George Miller. And he did something called, it's one of the most famous cited papers in all psychology, the study of the magic number 7. And this will become relevant in a minute, because what he said is the conscious part of your mind can only take 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information.
Right.
And what business owners do is they try to focus on loads of different things and get nothing done. So if you understand that single principle of planning, documenting, taking one step at a time and applying 100% focus to that, that's the first part of it. But the part that I think you're really interested in is...
I am interested in that, to be fair. I've never heard of that before at
Yeah,
all. And
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, I can totally believe that.
But the part you're really interested in is, why would you want to wait 72 hours? Like, oh, it's a product. Why?
Oh my God, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Why would
Yeah,
I'm
thank
like,
you, yeah.
no, I ain't got time to wait. For,
Yeah.
you know.
I couldn't get 8 hours sleep last night.
And they say that, you know, where your focus goes, your energy flows.
Yes.
So if you're focused on the past, that's very often where the things that have happened to you in the past, that's where very often depression comes from. If you focus on things in the future, which you're uncertain about, then that creates anxiety, because anxiety is uncertainty. Oh, shit, if that happens, no, excuse me.
No, it's fine.
And so all is focus should be about being in the present, having one task to do at any one time. Most small business owners don't get that.
Oh my God.
They try to do so many things, and all what you've got to do is you've got to dump everything out, plan it out properly, and then do one step and focus on it. Now, what if you could change your state in a few seconds, which you can, but most people don't teach you how to do it. So Dr. John Grinder taught us a 4-step, what he calls chain of excellence, and I've taught it on every single Will to Act course that I've done. And I very often teach it with business owners, because when you're low frequency, your inner game is low frequency, you're low mood, that sort of stuff. How do you raise it above? So one of the first ways to do it is to focus on something you're grateful for. You can't be grateful and fearful at the same time. So most people don't practice gratitude. But Grinder taught me this 4-step thing, and then he said, step 1 is you change your breathing. So you breathe in deep, and in the last 22 years since I've been doing this, breath work has exploded in the last few years. And I'm teaching people, and people are going, oh, that's a bit weird.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's a bit weird. I'm doing this 22 years ago.
Yeah.
I've got rugby players.
Yeah.
I've got 30 rugby players in a room, and they're all going, who's this idiot?
Nutty,
you know what I mean? Who's this bald-headed dude?
Right at the beginning of the curve.
Yeah, and football too, yeah. But rugby players, and I was like, okay, so the first thing is, when you breathe in deep and you open up your peripheral vision, you're turning your focus from your inside game to the outside world.
Oh my God. So when I said to you, 'cause we were in Spain on a golfing trip a couple of weeks ago together, weren't we, with like 24 other business owners? And and my group was teeing off first, and I said to you, how do you not get all the jitters from teeing off and absolutely fluffing it? So sorry, to get back to this is what I just realised. This is what you started to tell me.
That's right, yeah.
Sorry,
So the first thing is if you're having not a great time, very often your focus is low and it's internal.
Yeah.
So the first thing to do is change your breathing, which changes your body language or your physiology, and you have a real powerful, if you're in a powerful state, physiology, it helps you control your state. And so breathing opens your diaphragm and it opens your chest. And I insist on people breathing in and out and blowing any feelings that are not benefiting them out. So the breathing's first. I always get people to open up the periphery, to go in peripheral vision. So, you know, I can see when, like, your hands moving, all that sort of stuff. And I'll do this in a training and get everybody doing it. Very often when you do it for the first time, they're going, oh. So then breathe in your physiology, which begins to... Very good.
I'm doing it now.
I know.
You do feel immediately different, don't you?
Yeah, that's why I just said very good.
Yeah.
Which controls your mental state. So the steps are breathing, physiology, your internal state changes, and then so does your behavior or your results or your outcome. Now, if people just taught that one thing to business owners and entrepreneurs, or if they just taught it at school, how to control your state in what can be 10, 15, 20, half a minute, I think that people would not be miserable like they are. But what happens is all the news and all the bad stuff that's happening in the outside world, we allow the outside world to infect our inside world.
Yeah.
And I always say this, if you imagine a balloon, right, the inside of the balloon has to be at least the pressure of the outside world for it to remain where it is. Yet us as business owners and entrepreneurs, we allow our inside world to reduce and reduce and reduce, and we wonder why things aren't working for us.
Oh my God, what a great analogy. Gosh. So the 4 steps that you just went through, combined with also the gratitude piece, is it, of immediately, I guess, because I do think, you know, throughout the day it can be easy to, not easy is the wrong word, you can start the day in a certain way, and as the day progresses,
each bit of energy is chipped away from you.
You deflate. A lot of people can, and I do set an alarm actually for midpoint in the day to go, let's just reset the intention just to keep on track, because it can be very easy to get, like you've just said, almost smaller and smaller and smaller, isn't it, as stuff hits you. So so the 4-step piece, and with the gratitude, is that just because we have talked about it a little bit, but if somebody's like, well, how do you do that? Is it literally just, it doesn't have to be a big thing you're grateful for. It can be... No,
actually, it's more beneficial if you just... When people are in low moods, they don't appreciate the things around them. So they don't appreciate the weather, whether it's raining or not. They don't appreciate the breathing.
Yeah.
They're saying, oh, I don't like this, I hate this, or whatever. Yeah. And I very often say I'm embarrassingly awesome. I woke up this morning breathing, because that's the first gratitude of the day. And then I'm grateful for my wife, Nikki. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for the weather. Nikki put this app on this morning for listening to the birds in the garden. And I was like, that's a bit odd. But she's now, after all the years we've been together, she is now going through cold water swimming. She's doing breathing. She's going to retreats. And she's like being true to herself. And I think as business owners, your energy, if you've got 100% energy, little things come to you and take a little bit every day.
Yeah.
And you know the things that we used to talk about in the EC, you can either be a radiator of energy or a drainer of energy. Yeah. And you recognise that if you're a radiator, people want to be around radiators of energy.
Yes, they do.
But if somebody, and you can tell this in an office, when somebody walks in, if you've got a load of staff, somebody walks in and people go, oh, you know that person's a drainer. But if somebody walks in and everybody goes, oh, so and so's here, the radiator of energy. And I think it's probably 20 years ago I read a book called The Celestine Prophecy, and it was the first time it taught me about the transfer of energy. Because if you think about it, at an atomic level, all we are is energy in space. Yeah, atoms have protons, neutrons, electrons, so positive charge, a negative charge, and a negative charge. Our job is to keep more positive charges in our body, especially as a business owner, because it's absolutely fascinating that. I don't think you can build a successful business on low energy.
Yeah.
And it's the first step. So state of mind, thoughts, emotions, actions and behaviours, results. And people starting this, I want this result, but my actions and behaviours, I don't know why I don't want it, or I don't know my why, or I don't know where I'm heading. And that 3 parts that we talked about earlier, the mindset or mental performance part, strategy and structure, and consistent discipline, the answer to everybody listening to this, if they want better or more improved results to make an impact on themselves and families and people around them, they're going to find the solution to what they want in one of them 3 areas in that triangle.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Honestly, it's absolutely fascinating. And so people talk about like good energy and vibrations, don't they? And I've just realised that there's actually science behind the vibrations. I didn't realise that you could record emotions in frequencies.
Yeah, so it's called the map of consciousness for the people looking here. You'll have a look if you go onto the internet and have a look at it, and they actually measured the emotions, and there's a lot of science behind each one, but actually raising your state, like gratitude, 800-900, and the highest one I think is 1,000 megahertz per second, is authenticity. And when somebody in your environment's not being authentic, everybody knows. They might not be able to put their finger on it, but they feel it inside.
Wow.
There's something that person said isn't in alignment.
Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. Wow. So, I feel like I know that we don't have all day, and I'm just trying to hone down what's the most impactful here for business owners, because something you just said as well in terms of gratitude, state, knowing what you want. You just mentioned something which really ties in so well with everything I talk about in my weekly newsletter, Win the Week, in all of my content. So business owners overload themselves with lots of different tasks and things to do. And just so when you are working with business owners, how do you distill that down to getting really clear?
Yeah, the first thing I do is I look at the diary. So I say, show me your diary. And they're like, what do you mean? And I first started doing this many years ago. I say, what are you doing a week on Tuesday? If people say I'm overwhelmed, I'll say, what are you doing a week on Tuesday at 1 o'clock? I don't know, but I'll be busy. Yeah, no, but doing what? What space do you allocate in at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday? What do you do? And they go, well, I kind of just, and what you realise is most people are like winging it on a daily basis. And so in order I think that what you have to do is you have to have a longer, a medium, and a short-term plan. Then you have 10 years, 5 years, or 3 years, so 10 or 5 year where you want to be, and then a 3-year goal or picture, and then a 1-year plan. And you focus on the 1-year plan, and then you break it down into quarters, and then you focus on the next 90 days, which is where there's a lot of science behind what Nigel says. He never talks about this, but 90 minutes. There's been studies done that 90 minutes is the optimum time to work on a certain task.
Oh, really?
So I talked to Nigel about this one other way. For me, 90 minutes has never been about marketing. It's been about thinking time, because you don't transform your results, you don't shape your future, create your own destiny without transforming the way that you think. And that's where mind shaping came. Using your mind to transform your results. And then once you get your where you need to be in 90 days, you'll do all this because you've grown a business into the level you've grown it. You'll do it all. But then it's like, okay, then we need the right person in the right seat doing the right things at the right time. And there's a space for everything that you do. When business owners get to that level, and you can do it on your own, or you can do it with a team of 2 to 200 people.
Yeah.
When you get that level of clarity, and then you know what has to be done each day, less is more. So you do 3 things in a day. If once you've done them 3 things in that day, Nigel calls it 90 minutes. I think it's thinking time.
Yeah.
Once you've done them 3 things, you can do whatever you want to do for the rest of the day. Like answer calls or be on your phone or do all that sort of stuff. But if you get the most important things that move you towards the result that you want done first. And talking about the study, the magic number 7, if you understand that between 5 and 9, average of 7 bits of information in your mindset. We've got a coffee table here. If you continue to put files on, pretty soon they'll fall off. And when people forget things or they get overwhelmed, it's because they've got more in their conscious awareness than what they can deal with.
Right.
And that's what starts waking people up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Because I've got all these things to do, and you wake up because your unconscious part of your mind is saying, hey, you've forgotten this. And people wake up, they say, what do I do in that? I say, well, keep a book at the side of your bed. When you wake up, write it down. Your unconscious or your subconscious part of your mind has no reason to remind you about it then. I think it's really, most people are not aware of the power of the mind.
Yeah.
And the difference that makes a difference, because those that are super successful and those that have mediocre results lie in your mindset or your mental performance. 100%.
And just when we were talking just earlier on about ultimately if you had 2 twins and one can be super successful and one can be maybe addicted to drugs and just different. So what is it? Because so if somebody even had similar upbringings, what is the change there in the 2 people? So
Socrates, more than 2,000 years ago, said the quality of my questions determine the quality of my results, right? So if I say to you, if the one's really successful and one's not, these twins, and which one do you think this is if they say this to themselves in their mind? Why does this always happen to me? Which one is it? The one that's successful or not successful?
The one that's not successful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If it's like, if they say like, okay, what do I need to do now to take me to the next level? Which one is it?
The one that is successful. Yeah.
So then you know this, and it's the quality of your thoughts. The quality of your thoughts and your thinking, which is why 90 minutes is thinking time and not marketing. The quality of your thoughts and your thinking determines the quality of your results. And how to amplify the quality of your thoughts, TEAR, is the state management. So practice getting into state. There's a reason why Tony Robbins gets every person that's attending his events up and moving like that. Yet hardly any businesses do that. Well, what would happen is right before you start, if you got everybody in your business into a high performance state.
Yeah, my gosh.
Exactly. Because
it would be transformative, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And how much more do you get done before you go on holiday? Because you know it has to be done. You're higher frequency. You know you're going on holiday and you get a load more done. Imagine if business owners could get their staff in the right state and the right frame of mind every single time.
Yeah. I've actually never thought of that at all.
Yeah.
My God.
That's why I say it's the power of the inside world, the way in which you think, your steer framework, the way in which you think, that transforms your results. And that's where the word mind shaping come from, the mind shaper. And David Brown, one of our friends, he came up with that term.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he did,
No
yeah.
way.
And I said, I don't know what it is. This is like, 10 or 12 years ago. And I said, I don't know what it is that I know what I do, but I can't put a finger on it. And most people are like that. And he said, well, He said, I like it. I liken it to a ball of clay. I was like, that's interesting. And he said, well, you can buy a ball of clay for pennies from a hardware store.
Yeah.
He said, but only when you skillfully mold it and manipulate it can it increase in value by quite a lot. And he said, so you can make it like a jug or a vase. If you buy the clay for 10p and you artfully work the clay, you can sell it for 10, 15, 20, 100 pounds, 1,000 pounds. And you amplify your return on investment. And I think that's what it is. You work your mind to transform your results.
I love that. And on the just on the 90 minutes and the thinking time, I find it really interesting that you call it thinking time, because just most recently I've been quite fascinated in the fact that and reading books around it, that with the thinking time, it's really interesting that when you say when your mind is least free of stuff, for want of a better word, that is when all the good stuff happens, isn't it? The more
Holidays.
Holidays, even like when I'm drying my hair, like whether it's content or ideas, or I should say that to them, or like it comes because you're just kind of doing one thing. And I think business owners get because there's so much coming at us and it's getting quicker and faster, and there's so many things now to explore and discover, and can we implement that? But there's so much to be said for also slowing down, isn't there, and having times to slow down. And it's not just about
getting more stuff done. Because this is focused on the fun stuff. So the fun stuff really should be about, I don't believe there's such a thing as work-life balance. I think it's balancing, because at some points you've got to be more in your business than you are in your home life, but other points you've got to bring it back.
Totally.
And, you asked a question earlier about if people are overwhelmed and stuff like that. One of the questions I ask them is, when was the last time you had a holiday? Or I can't afford it, I haven't done this. And one of the first things I say, well, do whatever you need to do, go on a holiday. Because I always say this, and my wife gives me a dig in the ribs when I say this. I said, if I was to take all the clothes out my wife's wardrobe, so all the shoes, handbags, and then throw them away, it would open up a new thought process for her, because she'd say, okay, I need to go shopping. And then she'd do different actions and it'd fill it all up again. It's a great metaphor, because that's what would happen. She'd be like, okay, well, that's happened. So, all right, where's our card? And let's go shopping.
Start afresh.
And I think that's the same. The most successful people have more holidays, but most people believe that they need to be successful before they have more holidays. It doesn't matter where you go. When the kids were young, I'd take them camping or something, like in tents, so it didn't cost a lot. But it's that mental free time that really helps people, because you can be sat somewhere and you see something and it sparks something in your mind, and if your conscious mind's cluttered, you can't pick it up. And so you can see something and go, oh my God. Or for me, I always read books when I'm away. And I I don't know how long we've got left, but there's a great story of how it's like 10 years ago, how I created a framework for myself saying living life back to front.
Right.
So what I did is I sat on the beach at Cyprus, my wife and Jake, and I'm reading 2 books. One was Conquer the Chaos by the Infusionsoft founders, how they conquered the chaos in their book. And then Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. So I'm interested, because 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever it was, I was like, having experienced chaos of growth. And I was like, geez, this is like, how did other people solve it? Because I believe in modelling. If they can solve it, so can I. And then I read that, and then on Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, he said, I put $12,000 in a bank account, then I go live in Thailand for a year, because he loves martial arts and Muay Thai. And I said to my wife, I said, Nikki, do you fancy going to live in Thailand? I said, all this thing's happening. And I said, we could, for what we spend now. And she said, no, of course not. And kids are young, school, all that, all the excuses.
Right.
And I said this, and I'll repeat this on a training course. I always say, fellas, never say what I'm about to say next, because it didn't work well for me. And I'd say, it's clear to me we want something different out of life. And she looked at me as though, what? And I was like, oh, that came out all the wrong way. Oh,
it sounds like the start of a very big conversation.
That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. I was like, no, that wasn't what I meant. But what happened was, she said, well, how would it work? And I said, well, I don't know. And this is, again, the power of being away on holiday and thinking. I said, but I do know somebody who's lived in Thailand, and is an early member of the EC called Michelle Holmes. I don't know if you remember her.
No.
Yeah. So I rang her and I said, look, how much does it cost? What are the kids' schools?
Yeah.
And then I did this in my head. Right, okay, so how much does it cost me to live today like I'm retired? And it was like, well, in order for me to know that, I need to map out how much I'm spending each month. So I'd put this figure together. And then I went, yeah, but if I was retired, what would I do? And when you think in that way, you force yourself into a mindset of like, what would I do if money was no object? If I didn't need money, how would I spend my days?
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about all the things I wanted to do. And when I did a money calculation, and I was coaching business owners, entrepreneurs at the time, I won't say the numbers because for some people it'll be quite high, and for some people it'll be quite low. But I was making, just in coaching, somewhere between 2 and 3 times a year what I needed to live my ideal life.
Oh, wow.
And so I went, oh my God. So if I need that every month and I just do what I love, I can live that life. And most people don't do that.
Yeah.
And so now, for the last 10 years-ish, I always say this. I always say, you just got me with the...
Sorry, I distracted you then by looking at the time.
So I'm like thinking to myself, like, if I don't need money, would I do this? Would I work with this person? And if I don't think we're in a line, no matter what it is, I'll say no. Because, I want to live every day like I'm retired. And I think that's if you can build your business like that.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, people don't grow their business. They don't look at what they're going to do in their business, and they don't do that with retirement. People get there and then very often have 2 or 3 months and then go, oh, this is not what I thought. So why don't you live it today is the thing that I've been doing for about 10 years.
Oh my God, I love that. And we've unfortunately run out of time. That is hands down the fastest hour I've ever done in podcasting so far. That has definitely flown. That has absolutely flown, Terry. But it also feels like the perfect moment to fit. And we didn't even get onto the business buying that you do and how you help business owners. But honestly, I guess to round up, Terry, where, if anybody, like, you've covered so many topics that I know people will be nodding their heads at and like, how do I do more of that? Like, if anybody wants to find you, get in touch with you, where's the best place to find you, Terry?
I think probably mindshaperacademy.co.uk. Right now, as we speak, I don't know when this will go out, but right now as we speak, we've just got a landing page there. But by the time this goes out, it'll probably be a site there where we're helping business owners focus on 80% psychology and 20% strategy and mechanics. And so that's a small business that I'm put together, working with my boys, because at the end of the day, why do you do anything if it's not for your family? So I'll be working with them, working in the background, everything like that. So
I love that. And whilst this has been very heavy on mindset, this episode, you've bought businesses, sold businesses, grown businesses to humongous sizes. So you do both sides of it, don't you, with mindset and business strategy as well? Yeah.
If you just did mindset, nobody would buy anything. But yeah, we built an 8-figure portfolio through buying businesses, and again, that was a mindset shift.
Yeah.
Well, can you buy them? Well, how do you do that? Well, there's a strategy to that too. So we'll be doing how to value, build, and sell, a course in Mindshaper Academy. How to buy businesses, how to buy a business, the structure and strategy around it. There's for a small fee, members can attend that days, and that's what. But mainly, and you just say it there, I never got on one. So in 2 months, in July, I'm running another Will to Act, but not through Nigel's organisation, through the Mindshaper Academy, and that's kind of why I'm putting that together. So.
Oh wow, fantastic! Well, it'll definitely be in like the show notes as well, because the Will to Act course, I've heard so many people have had like life-changing experiences with it. So definitely, if you think that's what you need, you should check that out. Mm-hmm. Terry, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure today. I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, Al.